Good morning, dear friends. Whether here in our sanctuary or home live streaming, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship at Stony Brook. My name is Laura Lesh, and I am so happy to be here with you all today, snow and everything, and serving as your worship associate with our service leader for this morning, Frank Myers, my fellow worship associate, Joan Rubenstein, musicians John and Lee Morris, Shelley Pasaris, and Joanne Hammer, and our tech wizards, Linda Cortese, Rich Hall, Robert Pond, and Dan Weymouth. Our minister, Reverend Margie Allen, will be back in our pulpit next week. Deb Little, our director of religious education, is supervising our weekly classes for children out in the garden, believe it or not, with our dedicated team of teachers. I want to offer a special welcome to any of you who are with us for the first time today. We're delighted to have you here with us, and since our services really vary from week to week, we hope you'll return several times to get a true sense of who we are as a community of faith. Unitarian Universalism is an aspirational faith with a living tradition, growing and evolving. There's no one creed which you must accept to belong here. We come from a rich variety of faith backgrounds, and we are united by 7 principles, and 6 sources of wisdom guide us. All of these you can learn about on our website at UUFSB.org and our denominational website at UUA.org. We welcome those of all ages, abilities, and identities who are searching for a spiritual home. We are all seekers of truth and meaning here, as we are called to be by our 4th principle, which is the focus of this morning's service through an examination of the life and writings of Abraham Lincoln. In order to ensure that all of us here in our sanctuary are safe, please keep your masks on while inside unless speaking from the pulpit, and hum rather than sing along with the hymns. Only our masked hymn leader will sing. Of course, if you're home, you can sing out as loud as you like. For those of you who are here, please remain after the service for our social time out on the deck, where you can enjoy the beverage you brought, some snacks being shared with each other as well. For those of you live streaming, you'll find the link for today's order of service to go there, and the handout and the words to the hymns in the YouTube chat as well. After the service, please leave YouTube, go to our webpage or yesterday's newsfeed, and click on the link for the small group chats to connect with others and meet, greet, discuss the service, or whatever else comes up. Out on the deck or in the Zoom room, you'll find friendly folks who will be able to answer any questions you might have. So welcome to all of you. I do hope our time together will be informative, spiritual, and inspirational for you. It's time to turn off those cell phones, get comfy, wrap up in a blanket if you need to, relax your mind, and open your heart to the sound of our bell as we begin our worship together. Joan will light our chalice this morning, and then a menorah, while I read these special words by UU Minister Kendall Gibbons in honor of Hanukkah, which begins tonight. The first part of this poem you'll hear now, and the second part you'll hear at the end. This is a change from what's in your printed order of service. It was a last-minute gift to us from Reverend Margie. 2 things about the light of Hanukkah. First, put away the sewing. Set down the clock that is losing time and needs to be adjusted. The bank statements to be reconciled, the penmanship and spelling exercises to complete, the dried beans to sort by size. Look at the light. It is not to be spent in diligence, dutifully illuminating tasks, but seen from the eye to the mind to the memory to the heart to the soul, from beauty to gratitude to faith. Praise the light and the source of the light. Be inspired. Do not use the light. Do not lose the holiness of this moment in the press of ought to be. It is forbidden to work by the light of these candles. Would you burn your lover's last letter for kindling? Watch the glow, like jewels against the velvet of night sky. Waste this light in awe, as in the ancient temple it is said they burned the oil, profligate for reverence and thanks. Blessed is the shaping of our lives by commandment and memory. Blessed is the light. To be continued. Thank you for that stirring music, which so beautifully sets the tone for our theme this morning. Let's join together in reading our affirmation of purpose. The words are in your order of service and posted online. We join together here as purposeful companions to support and challenge one another in our efforts to deepen our spiritual practice and understanding, to celebrate human difference in our outreach and welcome, to listen, speak, and act with humility and compassion, to respond boldly to injustice among us and beyond us, and to tend and protect this parcel of earth and all the life it nourishes. In doing so, we strive to create the world our principles envision and to channel the wisdom of our sources faithfully to that end. Good job. I am honored to introduce you all to Frank Myers, a longtime member of this congregation and Stony Brook University Professor Emeritus of Political Science. Frank has graced this pulpit many times over the years and is always captivating. But today, he's departing from his usual focus on our fifth principle, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and society at large, and he is looking instead at our fourth principle, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning by examining the example of Abraham Lincoln. It turns out that the life and work of Lincoln is one of Frank's many areas of academic interest and expertise. His insight into the significance of religion, to the legacy of this quintessential American icon, is truly something special. And we are fortunate indeed to have him here to share his recent work in this area with us today. Frank.
Thank you, Laura, and greetings to all of you. Let me take this stupid thing off. Glad to see you. I get to take it off. That's one of my privileges here. And I'm glad to see everybody here, you hardy souls who brave the cold, and all the people out there in Streamland, and I say hello to them too. My opening words today are from Abraham Lincoln, as you might expect, but they're not from any of his writings or his famous speeches or anything like that. When he was, after he'd been killed, his secretary, John Hay, was going through his files, his materials and desks and everything, and he came across one, a drawer was locked, and he opened the drawer, and, pardon me, and he, excuse me 1 second here. And he found a piece of paper in there. It had no title, no date, or anything. He estimated that, Hay estimated that it was written probably in 1862, probably September 1862, and he gave it the title, The Meditation on the Divine Will. Here it is, that Lincoln wrote to himself. The will of God prevails. In great contests, each party claims to act in accordance with the will of God. Both may be, and one must be wrong. God cannot be for and against the same thing at the same time. In the present Civil War, it is quite possible that God's purpose is something different from the purpose of either party. And yet the human instrumentalities, working just as they do, are of the best adaptation to effect his purpose. I'm almost ready to say that this is probably true, that God wills this contest, and wills that it shall not end yet. By his mere great power on the minds of the now contestants, he could have either saved or destroyed the Union without a human contest. Yet the contest began. And having begun, he could give the final victory to either side any day. Yet the contest proceeds. Our next hymn coming is the number 318, We Would Be One. Shelley and Joanne.
We would be one. For this responsive reading, it's number 512 in your hymnal, entitled We Give Thanks This Day by Reverend Eugene Pickett. And I will be reading the regular type. Hopefully you have the same type as I do. I will be reading the regular type, and Laura will be leading you in the response, which is the bold italics. For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations.
We give thanks this day.
For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons.
We give thanks this day.
For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements.
We give thanks this day.
For our human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for space and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression.
We give thanks this day.
For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared.
We give thanks this day.
For all of us who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, we have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom.
We give thanks this day.
For human liberty and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose.
We give thanks this day. We pray that we might live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Lincoln was a prolific writer and a brilliant orator. There are hundreds of famous quotes attributed to him. As we enter our time of meditation, I offer one which may not be among his most well-known quotes, but it is one of my favorites, and it gives a hint of the importance of faith to him in times of trouble. These words will be followed by a time of silence, so you may consider his words and whatever else they may bring up for you. Shelley and Joanne will bring us out of our contemplations with hymn number 113, Where is Our Holy Church? So sit back, take a slow, deep, relaxing breath, and close your eyes if that feels right. Abraham Lincoln said, "If there is anything that links the human to the divine, it is the courage to stand by a principle when everyone else rejects it." Engaging in the work of love and justice making by sharing our Sunday collection plate with an organization doing such work is for us a spiritual practice. For the month of November, our Share the Plate recipient is Planned Parenthood Hudson Peconic. In these times when reproductive justice is being challenged, Planned Parenthood Hudson Peconic, which also serves Suffolk County, continues to provide much-needed healthcare services such as birth control, STI testing, prenatal care, and gender-affirming hormone care. They offer reproductive health education that is comprehensive, medically accurate, and age-appropriate. In giving to Planned Parenthood Hudson Peconic, we support their good work in our local communities. If ever there was a time Planned Parenthood needs our help as they take on the legal struggle of reproductive justice on the national stage and still doggedly maintain their local services to women and their partners during this pandemic, it is now. Today ends our collection for them, so please give as generously as you can. As we pass the plate here in the sanctuary, information on how to donate is being shown online, and there's a link in the chat which will take you to the donate button on our website. And while you're in the spirit of giving, don't forget our interfaith collection for the Shinnecock kelp farmers. The instructions for supporting that effort can be found in the special news feed that was sent out last Wednesday. Lee and John have a special piece of music for us while you're donating, which was actually written in 1863.
We're tenting tonight on the old campground. Give us a song to cheer our weary hearts, a song of home and friends we love so dear. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the hearts that are looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Tenting tonight, tenting tonight, tenting on the old campground. We've been tenting tonight on the old campground, thinking of days gone by, of the loved ones at home who gave us the hand and the tear that said goodbye. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the hearts that are looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Tenting tonight, tenting tonight, tenting on the old campground. We've been fighting tonight on the old campground. Many are lying near. Some are dead and some are dying. Many are in tears. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the hearts that are looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Tenting tonight, tenting tonight, tenting on the old campground. We're tired of war on the old campground. Many are dead and gone. Of the brave and the true who've left their home, others been wounded long. Many are the hearts that are weary tonight, wishing for the war to cease. Many are the hearts that are looking for the right to see the dawn of peace. Tenting tonight, tenting tonight, tenting on the old campground. Dying tonight, dying tonight, dying on the old campground.
This morning I'm going to talk about Lincoln's religious evolution. Now, we know a lot about his evolution of his ideas about slavery. Lincoln always, throughout his life, hated slavery. But before the Civil War, he worried that if abolition occurred abruptly, a lot of violence would occur, and that that former slaves would never be accepted into American life. For a while, he advocated that they be sent back to Africa, but he soon realized that was an impractical idea, fantasy, and so he dropped that idea. The Civil War itself brought his ideas into a much sharper focus, and we know he issued the Emancipation Proclamation as a wartime measure under his powers as commander-in-chief. And then, when as the end of the war approached, he fought hard for the passage of the 13th Amendment, which abolished slavery permanently and everywhere in the United States. His religious views also underwent a transformation. It was not as important in America, not as consequential to American history as his views on abolition, but nevertheless closely related to it, and helps us to understand the change in his attitude toward abolition. If we want to understand Lincoln at all, we need to come to terms with his evolving religious perspective. Lincoln grew up in the frontier, Kentucky and Indiana and Illinois, which is an area where people were generally ignorant and prone to violence of all kinds, stupid violence all the time, and also was marked by the arrival of itinerant preachers who would come through and preach the gospel to the people. They were spellbinding, these preachers, highly emotional sermons that they gave, and they attracted huge audiences and converted many people. They were not sophisticated in theology at all, but they knew how to hold a crowd. As a youth, Lincoln developed a strangely ambivalent attitude toward this world that he was growing up in. He wanted not simply to be part of it, but to be admired, to be esteemed, as he put it, to be liked. He tried hard to be liked, and even at the same time, while he was doing that, he rejected the ignorance, he rejected the violence, he hated the violence of the people around him. He rejected their ignorance. He was always trying to learn things, read things, unlike most of the people. And he also rejected the dominant charismatic religion. He resisted it. Now, he handled this complex problem of a boy growing up with a humor and a skill that's remarkable in a teenage boy. After he would go to church, and after church, he would come out, he would gather his friends around him, a lot of other teenagers and even some adults, climb on a tree stump, and he would give the preacher's sermon over again, the same one he just heard. Only now, he would wave his arms crazily, he would exaggerate it, the whole thing would be a satire on the preacher himself, you see. And he said he liked the preacher who waved his arms like a man fighting bees. As he grew into young manhood, this visceral reaction against established religion became a more intellectual attitude. And he became part of a group that was sort of like a book club. They met and they discussed serious books. Their favorite book was Thomas Paine's book, The Age of Reason, which is a rationalist attack on all traditional religion. His attitude toward religion comes through in his first major public address, the so-called Lyceum speech of 1838. His topic was the breakdown in civility and the rise of violence, especially racist violence, in towns and villages all along the Mississippi River. In his speech, he says there were so many lynchings of slaves that at one point their bodies were hanging from the trees like Spanish moss. His reaction in this speech is a rationalistic one. He insists that a new religion is needed, but it should be a political religion, not a religious religion. It should be a political religion, a sort of secular religion built on obedience to the law, and to call, as Lincoln put it, for cold, calculated, unimpassioned reason in public affairs. Cold, calculated, unimpassioned reason. That became Lincoln's hallmark. In his speech on the need, he gave another speech a couple of years later on temperance to the Temperance Society. So they were trying to get people to stop drinking alcohol. And he didn't condemn the drunks in the society. In this speech, he condemns the people who try to convert them. He says they go about it all wrong. They are constantly telling the people that who drink too much that they are in the hands of the devil, that they're going to burn in hell. That they're destroying their families and so forth. He said, you shouldn't do that. You should have sympathy, even empathy for the people who drink too much. He says, we who don't drink, he says for himself, he said, he didn't drink because he didn't like it. He said it made him feel intellectually flabby when he drank. But other people drink. He says even gifted people sometimes are drawn to alcohol. You should use rational persuasion to approach them. That's what he advocates. This is the Lincoln. Lincoln is a rationalist in his attitudes. He rejects fear. The standard thing was to make people so scared that they would stop drinking. He thinks that's the wrong way to go about it. And this attitude of his rationalism, his approach to religion, stayed with him. In the 1840s, when he was running for Congress, his opponent accused him of being an atheist. And that was a dangerous charge. If the public believed it, it would ruin his political career. He responded that he had never said anything against the scriptures, a kind of neutral response, a neutral denial. But he never joined any church in his life, and he never accepted the fundamentals of Christianity. He was never a Christian. In fact, he was exposed to Unitarianism, especially during the crucial years of the 1850s. And he was influenced by Unitarian writings. His law partner, William Herndon, was a Unitarian and an abolitionist, and immediate abolitionist. He wanted it now. And he was in constant correspondence with Theodore Parker, who was the main Unitarian minister in Boston. And when Parker wrote to Herndon, Herndon would read those letters from Parker to Lincoln. The guys spent a lot of time together just talking in the law office that they did. Lincoln and Herndon spent hours and hours together just talking about things. And Parker knew that Lincoln was beginning to develop a reputation as an up-and-coming politician, and Parker was interested. He knew that Lincoln was reading his letters. Parker is the one who came up with the expression, the term government of the people, by the people, for the people, that Lincoln later put into the Gettysburg Address, and has become almost the standard definition of democracy. He was never connected to a Unitarian church, but it's not unreasonable to assume that he had a strong Unitarian outlook, maybe, and a close and sympathetic familiarity with Unitarianism. This is Lincoln's mature years before the war, rationalistic and skeptical of traditional religion, especially of the emotional variety. But Lincoln was too complex a man to be described in such a simple and unequivocal way. A deep strain of fatalism characterized him throughout his life. His wife, Mary, said that the phrase he repeated all the time was, "What will be, and no cares of ours can arrest the decree." It wasn't originally a religious belief in him. This was secular. He was a kind of utilitarian. And he believed that our motives, all our actions are predictable. All of them. We have no free will. We all act all the time to pursue pleasure and to avoid pain. That's what we do. And you could predict what people always do. There's no freedom of will in his view, and he expressed this repeatedly to William Herndon in their conversations together. Richard Carradine, in his study of Lincoln, describes his outlook for most of his life as rationalist, universalist, Unitarian, fatalist. But the war changed Lincoln's outlook, and his secular fatalism became increasingly tinged with the Calvinist conception of divine predestination. Religious references begin to occur in his speeches. In the Gettysburg Address, for example, the central metaphor that runs through the address begins 7 years ago. Fathers conceived a child, essentially, a nation, and dedicated it. So a child is born. In the middle part of the speech, he's standing on the graveyard. He emphasizes death. And the middle part of the speech is all devoted to death. The last part of the speech calls for a new birth of freedom. And it echoes the fundamental Christian belief of being reborn, being born again. So that's in the Gettysburg Address even. As the war continued and progressed, its unexpected length and destruction and the loss of so many lives caused many people to turn to religious explanation, some kind of religious interpretation of the war's meaning. And Lincoln was among them. In my opening words today, I read Lincoln's meditation on the divine will. It was not meant for public consumption. It was rather a note to himself that Lincoln wrote and then locked away and never showed anyone. It shows us Lincoln wrestling with a problem that was as urgent as it was incomprehensible to him. In that short meditation, Lincoln's most remarkable, the ideas in that meditation dominate Lincoln's most remarkable speech, the Second Inaugural Address. Now, I think you have that here. You have copies of and I think it's being shown for people who are watching on television or on their computers. So you have it right there, and I have it in front of me, and I want to just go through it a little bit because I think it's a remarkable speech. It's on the wall in the Lincoln Memorial. On the left-hand side of the wall is the Gettysburg Address. On the right-hand side of the wall is carved the Second Inaugural Speech. People read it. I don't think they understand it, frankly, most of them. What I'm going to try to tell you what I think it means today. Now, it's only got 4 paragraphs, short. The first one is rather distant. He doesn't refer to himself at all. Just one little reference to himself at the end there. It's not, people expected, the war was almost over. Lee's army was trapped. It was dead. There was just a matter of time before it would end. In fact, the war ended about a month after the speech here. And so people expected a triumphal speech. Why not celebrate? Praise our troops. He doesn't do anything like that at all. It's a very somber opening to the thing. He says we're sort of satisfied that the war is going well. Then he turns around in the second paragraph and begins to talk about the causes of the war. He says, we all knew, we all sought to avert it, and all dreaded it. The interesting thing is, all he talks about here, words are both and all here, always through here. All dreaded it. Some people wanted to continue slavery, other people wanted to end it. And he says there, some wanted to destroy the Union without war, others wanted to dissolve the Union and divide effects by negotiation. Both parties deprecated war. One would make war rather than let the nation survive. The other would accept war rather than let it perish. And the war came. It's very strange, that sentence, and the war came. It just happens. Given the fact that you have this situation, there's going to be a war. No human will involved. The war just comes. Then he goes more into the causes of the war. He continues there. And he says, he disdains the South. He doesn't refer to the Confederacy. He never referred to the Confederacy. He called them the insurgents. He doesn't talk about their territory. He talks about the southern part of the American nation, you see. And he said the war was about slavery, not about states' rights. He doesn't even mention states' rights. The war is about slavery, Lincoln says. Everybody knew it at the time. They knew that slavery was somehow the cause of the war. And the two sides disagreed about this. The war has become greater than anybody expected. Nobody expected the magnitude or the duration which it has already attained. Nobody would realize that the cause, that slavery itself, might cease with or even before the conflict itself should cease. Look, each looked for an easier triumph and a result less fundamental and astounding. Then both read the same Bible, pray to the same God, each invokes his aid against the other, and now it's only time in the speech that you see a personal opinion come through. Up to this point, Lincoln is just describing things. He's a distant character. Suddenly now he does say, it may seem strange that any men should dare to ask a just God's assistance in wringing their bread from the sweat of other men's faces. But then immediately turns around and says, let us not judge that we be not judged. The North is guilty too. He always believed that. The North is guilty too. The wealth of the North comes from the South. And the banks, everything, it comes from the South. And he says, the Almighty has his own purposes. And now the speech begins to change with this sentence. When he refers to the Almighty, the speech begins to change. And it now becomes a much more religious speech, right in the middle of the paragraph. He says, the Almighty has his own purposes. And now he quotes Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew. Woe unto the world because of offenses, for it must needs be that offenses come, but woe to that man by whom the offense cometh. And then now he interprets this sentence. Slavery is one of those offenses which in the providence of God, he now wills to remove. God wills to remove it. I mean, think of what he's saying there. Slavery is one of those offenses which God says must come. God brings us slavery. And it continues through his appointed time, and he now wills to remove, and he gives the war to us. God gives us the war. That's the real cause of the war. You see, the real cause is God punishing us for slavery. And he says, this is what we feel. And then the next three sentences are remarkable. I think taken together, they're the most shocking sentences I've ever read in a political speech. I've read hundreds of political speeches in my life. I have never read a sentence like the sentences that come after this. And I think we should try to think of what he's really saying here. He says, we hope and pray that the war will end and pass away. And then the next sentence is the sentence. Yet if it continue, if God wills that the war continue until all the wealth piled by the bondsman's 250 years of unrequited toil shall be sunk, and until every drop of blood drawn with the lash, shall be paid for by another drawn with the sword. As was said 3,000 years ago, so still it must be said, the judgments of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. Think of what he's saying here. God wills it, and he will continue this war, possibly, if he wants to, possible, until all the country is entirely broke. All our wealth is destroyed. He'll continue it until everybody's dead. The last drop of blood being balanced by the last drop of blood drawn by the lash, being balanced by the last drop of blood drawn with the sword, till people are all dead. It's an extraordinary statement when you think about it. What kind of God are we talking about here? In Genesis, when God says he's going to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham stands up and talks to God. And he says he wants to negotiate. And God negotiates with Abraham. And he allows Abraham to do this. And Abraham does it very effectively. He negotiates. He said, would you save at least 50 righteous souls? What about the righteous people, he says? The good people. There are some good people in Sodom and Gomorrah. What about 50? God says, oh, maybe 50, okay. I'd say 50. What about 45? God says, okay, 45. What about 30? 35? 30. And he finally negotiates him down to about 9, you see. And this is courageous on the part of Abraham to do this. Lincoln's God does not negotiate. He's different. He is willing to kill everybody and have the whole wealth of the country be destroyed. And now, it's a strange speech, I think, in many ways. And as I say, people read it, we go into the Lincoln Memorial and read it, and I don't think they realize what they're reading. It's a stark contrast to the skeptical approach to religion that had marked his life up to this point. Why did he change so drastically? How could he move from being a rationalist to being a believer in divine predestination? Of course, I don't know the real answer to this question. Nobody does. Many people I've talked to about this have suggested that he didn't really believe in what he was saying. He didn't believe in predestination. He was merely pandering to his audience. But the meditation that I read out to you on the divine will in the opening words makes that interpretation unlikely. Lincoln seems to have been absolutely sincere. The problem brings to my mind a distinction that Hannah Arendt makes in her book, The Life of the Mind. Arendt makes a distinction between understanding and reason. In her view, understanding is knowing how the world works, why airplanes fly, why the climate changes, what are the causes of depressions and wars. It refers to knowing what great writers said, as well as human physics, nuclear physics, and human psychology. In other words, it refers to our relationship with the empirical world. That's our understanding. Reason, on the other hand, doesn't. Reason includes things like mathematics and logic, which have nothing to do with the empirical world. A brilliant child, a genius, learns math without knowing much about the empirical world at all. They can learn geometry and Euclid and all that. Reason also refers to the search for meaning. And according to Arendt, this is as fundamental to an aspect of the human mind as understanding. It is part of this is how our minds work. We need to find meaning in events. An event like the Civil War or the Holocaust demands that we look for some sense in them. We can't accept these events of this dimension without finding some sort of meaning in them. The war drew the Lincoln, the logical Lincoln, the rationalist Lincoln, out of his cold, calculated, unimpassioned reason, cold, calculated, unimpassioned thought of his younger days, the realm of understanding, really. into the realm of a search for meaning. In doing so, Lincoln left the need for empirical reference behind and entered a different intellectual area altogether, one that for him was essential in trying to make sense of the vast catastrophe over which he presided. We may find, as I do, that Lincoln's particular meaning is alien to us, even strange and incomprehensible. But I suspect that all of us at various times in our lives feel the need to go beyond the empirical world of understanding and into the realm of reason as Arendt understood it. It's part of being human.
Thank you, Frank, for a whole lot to chew on. Please join in humming or singing our final and one of our favorite hymns. Hymn number 16, "'Tis a Gift to Be Simple."
Well, first I want my closing words. For my closing words, I want to thank Lee and John for the perfect music today. I really appreciate that, and to Shelley and Joanne as well. And a special thanks to Laura for helping me a lot in the past few days. We've just celebrated Thanksgiving, and it's appropriate to remember that it was Lincoln who made it an official, permanent federal holiday. And my talk today reminds us that for Lincoln, this day has a deep religious significance. For him, it did. I can't think of better closing words than the last paragraph of the Second Inaugural, which tells us how we should conduct ourselves after a great trial. Today, we're struggling with the meaning of the war in Afghanistan, with an ongoing global pandemic, with many domestic problems. Lincoln's immortal words seem appropriate in this context. With malice toward none, with charity for all, with firmness in the right, as God gives us to see the right, let us strive on to finish the work we are in, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who shall have borne the battle, and to care for his widow and his orphan, and to do all which may achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace among ourselves and with all nations.
As Joan extinguishes our chalice, here is the second part of Kendall's poem for Hanukkah. Second, put the lamp in a window, in a doorway, on a balcony, in the front yard, on the village green, in Times Square. Release its beauty to the public view. Do not hoard the light. It is not yours to gloat over in private. Whenever, wherever it is safe, announce the miracle. Invite the neighborhood to remember with you. Perhaps next door they only half recall the story for some dim childhood ritual. Perhaps your 4 flames, then 5, then 6 might wake their dedication anew. Or, in the city of 1,000 names for God or none at all, those faithful candles might remind the hurried and the fallen, the defeated of heart, that beauty is yet possible, that the intention of higher purpose endures. Even to rouse the captive mind to curiosity, what's the story with those lights? Is an opening for the work of spirit. Testify. Let the tongues of flame bear witness to the world that miracles abound and joy abides. Blessed is the heritage of freedom. Blessed is the custom that illuminates our common darkness. Blessed is the sounding and the sharing of the light. Our benediction is reading number 680 in our hymnal, the words of Reverend Barbara Pescan. Because of those who come before, we are. In spite of their failings, we believe. Because of and in spite of the horizons of their vision, we too dream. Thank you all for being here this morning. Have a joyous and a healthy holiday season, everybody.